Maya Rodriguez lived in a small apartment above her family's corner store. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that doubled as her father's workshop. Every morning she woke up to the sound of trucks rumbling down the street and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery next door. Her mother, Carmen, worked at the textile factory from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Sometimes she had to stay late when big orders came in. Her father, Diego, ran the small store downstairs during the day and spent his evenings fixing broken radios, toasters, and old televisions for neighbors who could not afford to buy new ones. Maya was 17 years old and had learned to help wherever she could. After school, she would come straight home and work in the store. She knew how to count change, stack shelves, and talk to customers in both English and Spanish. The store sold basic things like milk, bread, canned food, and newspapers. It was not fancy, but it helped the family pay their bills. The building next to their store was different. It was made of red brick and had tall windows with white frames. Beautiful music came from inside every day. Maya learned that it was a music school called the Metropolitan Conservatory. Rich kids from across the city came there to learn piano, violin, and other instruments. When Maya was younger, she would press her ear against the wall between the 2 buildings. She could hear piano music, violin lessons, and sometimes a whole group playing together. The sounds were magical to her. She had never heard anything so beautiful in her life. One day when she was 12 years old, Maya was taking out the trash behind the store when she heard someone playing piano through an open window. The music was sad and happy at the same time. She stood there for almost an hour, just listening. When the music stopped, she felt empty inside, like something important had been taken away. That night at dinner, Maya asked her parents about music lessons. Her father laughed, but not in a mean way. He explained that music lessons cost a lot of money. Piano lessons at the conservatory cost more in 1 month than their family made in a week. Maya understood, but the disappointment sat heavy in her chest. Maya's grandmother, Abuela Rosa, lived with them sometimes when she was not staying with Maya's aunt across town. Abuela Rosa had been a singer in Mexico when she was young. She would tell Maya stories about performing in small clubs and how music could touch people's hearts. These stories made Maya dream even more about learning to play music herself. When Maya turned 15, something wonderful happened. The family next door was moving and having a garage sale. Maya was walking by when she saw an old electronic keyboard sitting on a table. It was not in good condition. Several keys did not work, and the power cord was held together with electrical tape. But when Maya pressed the keys that did work, they made real piano sounds. The woman selling it saw Maya playing and smiled. She said Maya could have it for $20. Maya had been saving money from helping in the store, and she had exactly $23 hidden in a jar under her bed. She ran upstairs and came back with the money. Maya carried the keyboard up to her room and plugged it in. Out of the 88 keys a real piano should have, only 61 worked on her keyboard. Some keys made no sound at all, and others made strange buzzing noises. But Maya did not care. She finally had something that could make music. Since her family could not afford music lessons, Maya had to teach herself. She walked to the public library every Saturday morning and used their computer to watch free piano lessons on the internet. She would write down notes and try to remember everything the teachers said. Learning this way was very hard. Maya could not ask questions when she got confused. She had to watch the same videos over and over again. Sometimes she would practice the wrong way for weeks before realizing her mistake. Her fingers often hurt from trying to stretch them the right way. The broken keys on her keyboard made everything more difficult. When a song called for a key that did not work, Maya had to play a different note or skip it completely. She learned to change songs to fit her keyboard instead of playing them the way they were written. Maya practiced every single night after finishing her homework and helping in the store. Her parents could hear the music through the thin walls, but they never complained. Sometimes her mother would hum along to songs Maya played over and over, again. The neighbors were not always so understanding. Mrs. Peterson, from upstairs, would bang on the floor with her broom handle when Maya practiced too late. The Martinez family next door asked her to keep it down during their baby's nap time. Maya learned to practice very quietly, or to use headphones when she could. During her junior year of high school, Maya's music teacher, Mr. Johnson, heard her playing piano during lunch break. The school had one old piano in the music room, and Maya would sneak in sometimes to practice on real keys. Mr. Johnson was amazed at how well she could play without having formal lessons. He started letting Maya use the music room after school. For the first time, Maya could practice on a real piano with all the keys working. It felt like magic. The sound was so much richer and fuller than her broken keyboard at home. Maya's playing improved quickly when she could finally hear how songs were supposed to sound. Mr. Johnson tried to convince Maya's parents to find money for real piano lessons. He said Maya had natural talent and could go far with proper training. But Diego and Carmen had to be realistic. The store was barely making enough money to pay rent and buy food for the family. There was no money for expensive music lessons. Maya understood her parents' situation, but she never stopped dreaming. She would walk by the conservatory next door and imagine herself inside, learning from real teachers and playing on beautiful grand pianos. She would see other students her age coming and going with their fancy instrument cases and music books, and she would wonder what it would feel like to be one of them. At night, alone in her room with her broken keyboard, Maya would close her eyes and pretend she was performing on a big stage. She imagined an audience listening to her play, their faces showing the same emotions she felt when she first heard music through the conservatory walls. Maya knew her family loved her and worked hard to give her what they could. She never complained about their small apartment or their simple life. But deep in her heart, she carried a dream that felt too big for her circumstances. She dreamed of becoming a real pianist, someone who could make the kind of beautiful music that had first captured her heart when she was just a little girl listening through the walls. Maya was walking home from school on a windy Tuesday afternoon when she noticed something strange. A piece of paper was stuck behind a loose brick near the back entrance of the conservatory. She had walked past this spot hundreds of times before, but today the wind had blown the paper just enough for her to see a corner sticking out. Curious, Maya looked around to make sure no one was watching, then carefully pulled the paper free. It was a flyer, slightly torn and faded from being outside but still readable. At the top, in bold letters, it said, Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, Annual Scholarship Auditions. Maya's heart started beating faster as she read. The Metropolitan Youth Orchestra was famous throughout the city. They performed at the biggest concert halls and had launched the careers of many professional musicians. Every year, they offered one full scholarship to a talented young musician. The winner would get free lessons, free instruments, and a chance to perform with the orchestra. The flyer explained that auditions were open to anyone between the ages of 16 and 18. Musicians could audition on piano, violin, cello, or several other instruments. They had to prepare a classical piece that was at least 5 minutes long and pay a $60 audition fee. Maya read the flyer 3 times before the information really sank in. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about. But as she walked home, reality began to set in. $60 was a lot of money for her family. That was almost as much as they made in profit from the store in a whole week. That night at dinner, Maya could not concentrate on eating. She kept thinking about the flyer, which she had hidden in her school backpack. She wanted to tell her parents about it, but she knew what they would say. They would tell her they could not afford the audition fee, and they would be right. After dinner, Maya went to her room and took out the flyer again. She studied every word carefully. The auditions were in 6 weeks. Musicians had to choose their own piece to perform, but it had to be from a list of approved classical composers. Maya recognized some of the names from her internet research: Bach, Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven. Maya had been teaching herself a piece by Chopin called Minute Waltz for the past few months. She had found a video of a famous pianist playing it and had been trying to copy what she saw. It was a difficult piece, full of fast runs and complicated rhythms, but Maya loved the way it sounded. On her broken keyboard, she could only play parts of it properly, but she had memorized the entire piece. The next day during lunch, Maya went to the music room where Mr. Johnson was eating his sandwich and grading papers. She showed him the flyer and explained how she had found it. Mr. Johnson's eyes lit up when he read it. "Maya, this is wonderful," he said. "The Metropolitan Youth Orchestra Scholarship is one of the most prestigious opportunities for young musicians in this city. Winners often go on to attend the best music schools in the country." Maya explained her situation with the audition fee. Mr. Johnson offered to talk to her parents, but Maya asked him not to. She knew her parents would feel guilty about not being able to afford it, and she did not want to add to their stress. Instead, Maya made a decision that night. She would find a way to earn the $60 herself. She had been saving her earnings from helping in the store, but she only had $37 saved up. She needed to find a way to earn $23 more in 6 weeks. Maya started working extra hours in the store after school and on weekends. She convinced her father to let her handle the store alone for a few hours each day, so he could focus on his repair work, which paid better. She also started doing small jobs for neighbors, carrying groceries, walking dogs, and cleaning yards. Every penny Maya earned went into her audition fund. She stopped buying lunch at school and packed sandwiches from home instead. When her friends wanted to go to the movies or get ice cream, Maya made excuses about being too busy. She could not tell them the real reason she was saving money because she was afraid they might think her dream was impossible. At the same time, Maya was practicing harder than ever. She had decided to audition with the Chopin piece, but playing it on her broken keyboard was becoming more and more frustrating. Several important notes in the piece fell on keys that did not work. Maya had to get creative, sometimes playing notes an octave higher or lower to make the melody recognizable. Mr. Johnson let Maya practice on the school piano whenever the music room was free. During lunch breaks, after school, and even some weekends, Maya would be at that piano working on her audition piece. Her fingers were getting stronger and her timing was improving, but she knew she still had a long way to go. 3 weeks before the audition, Maya made a difficult decision. She had a small collection of old books that her grandmother had given her over the years. They were classic stories in both English and Spanish, and Maya treasured them. But she knew that a used bookstore downtown bought old books, and she needed every dollar she could get. Maya carefully packed her beloved books in a box and took the bus to the bookstore. The owner looked through her collection and offered her $18 for all of them. It was not as much as Maya had hoped, but it was enough to put her over the $60 goal. Walking out of that bookstore without her books was one of the hardest things Maya had ever done. Those books had been her companions during lonely evenings and had sparked her imagination since she was a child. But she reminded herself that this sacrifice might lead to something even more meaningful. With 2 weeks left before the audition, Maya had saved $63. She had enough for the audition fee with a little extra for bus fare to the conservatory, but now a new worry emerged. Maya realized she had never performed for anyone except Mr. Johnson and her family. The thought of playing in front of judges at the conservatory terrified her. Maya decided she needed to practice performing in front of people. She asked Mr. Johnson if she could play her audition piece for some of the other music students. Word spread, and by the end of the week, nearly 20 students had gathered in the music room to hear Maya play. When Maya sat down at the piano bench, her hands were shaking. She had never felt so nervous in her life. She started the Chopin piece, but her fingers felt clumsy and unfamiliar. She made several mistakes in the first section and had to stop and start over. The second time through, she played better, but it was still not her best performance. After she finished, the students clapped politely, but Maya could see in their faces that they were not impressed. Some of them had been taking private lessons for years, and Maya's self-taught technique was obvious. She felt embarrassed and discouraged. That night, Maya almost decided not to audition. She lay in bed thinking about how much better the other students would be, how professional and polished their performances would sound compared to hers. She thought about her broken keyboard and her lack of formal training. Maybe she was fooling herself to think she had a chance. But then Maya remembered why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. It was not about being perfect or impressing people. It was about the feeling she got when she played, the way music could express emotions she did not have words for. She thought about all the hours she had practiced, all the sacrifices she had made, and all the dreams she had carried in her heart. Maya got up and went to her keyboard. Even though it was late and she had to be quiet, she played through her audition piece one more time. This time she did not worry about the broken keys or the mistakes. She just focused on the music and the story it told. When she finished, she felt peaceful and determined. She was going to audition. Whatever happened, she would know she had tried. The next morning, Maya filled out the audition application and put her $60 in an envelope. In just 10 days, she would find out if her dreams were strong enough to overcome the challenges she faced. Maya woke up at 5:30 in the morning on audition day. She had barely slept, spending most of the night going over her piece in her head and imagining different scenarios of what might happen. Her stomach felt tight with nervousness and her hands were already sweaty, even though the day had not gotten warm yet. She had laid out her clothes the night before. Maya owned only one dress that she thought was nice enough for such an important occasion. It was a blue sundress that her grandmother had sewn for her 3 years ago for her cousin's wedding. The fabric had faded a little from washing, and there was a small patch near the hem where Maya had torn it on a fence. But Abuela Rosa had mended it so carefully that you could barely see the repair. Maya's mother had pressed the dress and helped her practice walking in the only pair of dress shoes she owned. The shoes were black and slightly too small, but they were better than her everyday sneakers. Carmen had also helped Maya practice sitting properly and standing up straight, the way she imagined proper young ladies did at fancy auditions. After a quick breakfast of toast and orange juice, Maya gathered her things. She had printed out her audition piece from the library computer and put it in a plastic folder to keep it safe. She did not own a proper music portfolio like she had seen other students carrying, so she put everything in a clean plastic grocery bag from the store. Maya's parents both wanted to come with her, but someone had to watch the store. They decided that her father would drive her to the conservatory on his way to pick up supplies for the week. Diego did not say much during the car ride, but Maya could tell he was nervous for her. He kept adjusting the rearview mirror and tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. When they pulled up in front of the Metropolitan Conservatory, Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. The building looked even more impressive from the front than it did from the alley behind their store. Tall marble columns supported an elegant entrance, and wide stone steps led up to heavy wooden doors with brass handles that gleamed in the morning sun. "You can do this, Mia," her father said, squeezing her shoulder. "Remember what Abuela Rosa always says, talent comes from the heart, not from money." Maya nodded and got out of the car, clutching her plastic bag and smoothing down her dress. As her father drove away, she stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching other audition candidates arrive. Her heart sank as she saw what they looked like and how they came prepared. A sleek black car pulled up and a girl about Maya's age stepped out. She was wearing a beautiful navy dress with a pearl necklace and her hair was perfectly styled. She carried a leather portfolio that looked expensive and professional. Behind her, a woman who was probably her mother carried a large bouquet of flowers and was giving the girl last-minute advice about posture and breathing. Another car arrived, and a boy in a perfect suit emerged with what looked like his entire family. His grandmother, parents, and little sister all hugged him and wished him luck. The boy's father handed him a silver pen and told him it would bring good fortune. The boy's music folder was made of rich brown leather with his initials embossed in gold letters. Maya watched as more and more candidates arrived, each one looking more polished and prepared than the last. Many came with private teachers who gave them final coaching tips. Others arrived in groups with their music school classmates, chatting confidently about technique and interpretation. Everyone seemed to know exactly what to expect. Maya realized she was the only person who had arrived alone. She was also the only person carrying her music in a plastic bag. Looking down at her faded dress and scuffed shoes, she suddenly felt very small and out of place. Taking a deep breath, Maya climbed the stone steps to the entrance. The doors were heavier than they looked, and she had to use both hands to pull one open. Inside, the conservatory was even more magnificent than she had imagined. The lobby had a high ceiling with detailed molding painted in gold and white. A huge crystal chandelier hung in the center, casting rainbow light patterns on the polished marble floor. Oil paintings of famous composers lined the walls, and there were glass cases displaying antique instruments. The whole place smelled like lemon polish and fresh flowers. Maya had never been inside a building so fancy. At her high school, the floors were scratched linoleum, and the walls were painted concrete blocks. Here everything looked like it belonged in a palace or a museum. She was afraid to touch anything, worried she might leave fingerprints on the perfect surfaces. A long table was set up near the back of the lobby with a banner that read, "Audition Check-In." Maya joined the line behind the other candidates, trying not to stare at their expensive clothes and professional-looking portfolios. The conversations around her were about things she did not understand. Private instructors with foreign names, summer music festivals in Europe, and competitions she had never heard of. The girl in front of Maya was talking to her friend about her recent performance at Carnegie Hall as part of a youth program. She mentioned flying to Vienna the previous summer to study with a master teacher. Maya had never been on an airplane or traveled farther than the next city over. She began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake in thinking she could compete with these students. When Maya reached the check-in table, a volunteer with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard smiled at her politely. "Name?" she asked. "Maya Rodriguez," Maya replied, her voice coming out softer than she intended. The woman scanned her list and made a check mark. "Audition fee?" Maya reached into her plastic bag and pulled out an envelope containing her $60. She had counted the money 3 times that morning to make sure it was all there. The bills were small denominations, mostly 5s and 1s from her work in the store, and they made a thick stack. The volunteer counted the money with a slightly puzzled expression, as if she was not used to receiving cash payments in small bills. Most of the other candidates had paid with checks or credit cards. Maya felt her cheeks getting warm with embarrassment. "Instrument?" the volunteer asked. "Piano," Maya said. "Do you have your audition piece with you?" Maya pulled her plastic folder out of the grocery bag. The volunteer glanced at it and made another note on her clipboard. Maya noticed that everyone else had multiple copies of their music, bound in professional folders with their names printed on labels. "You can wait over there," the volunteer said, pointing to a seating area with elegant chairs and small tables. "We'll call your name when it's your turn." Maya walked toward the waiting area, very aware of the sound her shoes made on the marble floor. Several candidates and their families had claimed spots on the comfortable chairs, spreading out their music and belongings like they owned the place. Maya found an empty chair in the corner and sat down carefully, placing her plastic bag at her feet. From her seat, Maya could observe the other candidates more closely. They all seemed so confident and prepared. Many of them were doing warm-up exercises with their fingers or quietly humming through their pieces. Some had small electronic metronomes to help them keep time. Others were reviewing their music with their teachers or parents, discussing specific measures and phrasing. Maya realized she had not brought anything to help her prepare. She did not own a metronome, and she certainly did not have a private teacher to give her last-minute advice. All she had was her memory of the piece and the determination that had brought her this far. As she sat there, Maya started to overhear conversations that made her even more nervous. One boy was complaining that he had only been studying his piece for 3 months, as if that was not very long. Maya had been working on hers for almost the same amount of time, and she thought 3 months was plenty of preparation. A girl near Maya was telling her mother about the professional recording she had made of her audition piece to help her practice performing. Another candidate mentioned that his teacher had arranged for him to practice in a concert hall similar to where the audition would take place, so he would be comfortable with the acoustics. Maya had never even seen a real concert hall, much less practiced in one. The biggest room she had ever performed in was her high school music room, and that had only been for Mr. Johnson and a few other students. As more time passed, Maya began to feel increasingly out of place. Every conversation she overheard reminded her of how different her background was from the other candidates. They talked about music camps, master classes, and competitions as if these things were normal parts of growing up. For Maya, just having access to a real piano was a luxury. But then Maya remembered something her grandmother used to tell her. The music does not care how much money you have or what clothes you wear. The music only cares what you have in your heart. Maya closed her eyes and tried to focus on that thought. She was here because she loved music, not because she wanted to impress anyone or prove anything about her social status. When Maya opened her eyes, she noticed a young woman sitting across the room who also seemed to be alone. Unlike the other candidates, this girl looked nervous and kept glancing around at the fancy surroundings. She was not wearing an expensive dress or carrying a leather portfolio either. For just a moment their eyes met, and the other girl gave Maya a small, encouraging smile. Maya had been waiting for almost 2 hours when she heard her name called. A tall man in an expensive suit had emerged from what looked like the main audition room and was scanning the waiting area with sharp eyes. This had to be Director Harrison Blackwell, the famous conductor she had read about online. Director Blackwell was in his 50s, with gray hair perfectly styled, and a face that looked like it rarely smiled. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Maya's family made in several months, and his shoes were so shiny they reflected the light from the chandelier. Everything about him screamed wealth and importance, Maya Rodriguez, he called again, pronouncing her last name with an American accent that made it sound harsh and unfamiliar. Maya stood up, her legs feeling shaky after sitting for so long. She picked up her plastic bag and walked toward Director Blackwell, trying to remember everything her mother had taught her about standing up straight and making eye contact. As she approached, Director Blackwell looked her up and down with an expression that made Maya's stomach clench. His eyes took in her faded blue dress, her worn shoes, and the plastic grocery bag she was carrying. His eyebrows rose slightly, and Maya could see him exchanging a glance with his assistant, a thin woman with expensive glasses who was holding a clipboard. "Are you sure you're in the right place, young lady?" Director Blackwell asked, his voice carrying a tone that suggested he already knew the answer would be no. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "Yes, sir. I'm here for the piano audition." Director Blackwell's lips curved into what was barely a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I see." He looked at his assistant again, and Maya caught the woman rolling her eyes slightly. "And you've prepared an appropriate piece for today's audition?" "Yes, sir. Chopin's Minute Waltz," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Chopin," Director Blackwell repeated, as if the name tasted strange in his mouth when Maya said it. "That's quite ambitious for someone in your situation." Maya was not sure what he meant by her situation, but she could guess. She clutched her plastic bag tighter and waited for him to continue. Director Blackwell stepped closer to Maya, and she could smell his expensive cologne. His voice became quieter but somehow more cutting. "This is a serious institution, Miss Rodriguez. The Metropolitan Youth Orchestra is not a community center program or a feel-good charity project. We're looking for real talent here, students who have been properly trained and prepared for professional-level performance." Maya felt like the floor was shifting under her feet, but she managed to nod and say, "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Director Blackwell asked, his voice rising slightly. "Because frankly, I'm not sure you understand what you've gotten yourself into here. The students we typically accept have been studying with master teachers for most of their lives. They've attended prestigious music camps, competed in national competitions, and performed in some of the world's finest concert halls." Maya's heart was beating so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but she forced herself to keep looking at Director Blackwell's face. She would not look down or back away, even though every instinct told her to run. "Our scholarship recipients go on to attend places like Juilliard, Curtis, and the New England Conservatory," Director Blackwell continued. "They become professional musicians who perform with major orchestras and give recitals in Carnegie Hall. This isn't a hobby or a weekend activity. This is serious business." Director Blackwell paused and looked Maya over again, his eyes lingering on her plastic bag. "Perhaps you should consider more suitable pursuits. I'm sure there are community programs that would be more appropriate for someone with your background. Have you looked into the recreational music classes at the community college? Or maybe the church choir in your neighborhood?" Maya felt tears starting to form behind her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of this man, no matter what he said to her. She had worked too hard and come too far to give up now. Other candidates in the waiting area had started to notice the conversation. Maya could see them whispering to each other and looking in her direction. Some looked sympathetic, but others seemed to agree with Director Blackwell's assessment. A few were actually smirking as if they found the situation amusing. "I can see that you're determined," Director Blackwell said, his voice now dripping with condescension. "But determination without proper training and resources is just stubbornness. You wouldn't try out for the Olympic swimming team without having access to a proper pool and coaching, would you?" Maya finally found her voice. "With respect, sir, I'd like to audition anyway. I've prepared a piece and I paid the audition fee. I understand that I might not be selected, but I'd still like the chance to play." Director Blackwell's expression hardened. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm trying to save you from embarrassing yourself. Do you have any idea what the other candidates here today sound like? Do you understand the level of technical skill and artistic interpretation they bring to their performances?" Maya's hands were shaking now, but her voice was getting stronger. "No, sir. I don't know how they sound. But I know how I sound, and I think my music deserves to be heard." The director's assistant leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Maya caught the words "waste of time" and obviously not prepared. Director Blackwell nodded and turned back to Maya with an expression that was almost pitying. "Look around you. Miss Rodriguez," he said, gesturing to the elegant lobby and the well-dressed families. Does this look like the kind of place where someone like you belongs? I'm not trying to be cruel, but I am trying to be realistic. Some people are born to be musicians, and others are born to be other things. Maya felt anger building in her chest, mixing with the hurt and embarrassment. What kind of things am I born to be, sir? Director Blackwell seemed surprised by her direct question. Well, that's not for me to say. But certainly there are many valuable careers that don't require the kind of extensive training and cultural background that classical music demands. Cultural background? Maya repeated. Yes, well, Director Blackwell seemed uncomfortable for the first time in the conversation. Classical music is part of a long tradition. It requires not just technical skill but also cultural literacy, an understanding of history and context that comes from certain types of education and exposure. Maya understood now. He was not just talking about money or training. He was talking about class, about background, about the kind of family she came from and the neighborhood where she lived. In his mind, people like Maya simply did not belong in places like this. I think I understand classical music better than you think, sir, Maya said quietly. I've been listening to it and studying it for years. Maybe I didn't learn it in the same way as other students, but that doesn't mean I don't understand it. Director Blackwell looked at his watch with obvious impatience. Miss Rodriguez, I really don't have time to continue this discussion. If you insist on going through with this audition, you're welcome to do so. But I want you to understand that you're setting yourself up for disappointment and quite possibly humiliation. Maya took a deep breath and looked directly into his eyes. I understand the risk, sir. But I'd still like to audition. The director sighed dramatically and made a note on his assistant's clipboard. Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you. He turned to address the waiting area.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking a brief recess to
accommodate this audition. The way he said accommodate made it sound like Maya was asking for a special favor rather than the same opportunity that had been offered to everyone else. She could hear murmurs from the other candidates and their families, and she was sure they were talking about her. Director Blackwell started walking toward the audition room, then turned back to Maya one more time. I hope you're prepared to learn a valuable lesson today about knowing your place in the world, Miss Rodriguez. As Maya followed him toward the audition room, she felt something shift inside her. The fear and embarrassment were still there, but they were being overshadowed by something else, a fierce determination that she had never felt before. Director Blackwell thought he knew what kind of person she was and what she was capable of. He thought her background disqualified her from even trying. Maya gripped her plastic bag tighter and straightened her shoulders. She was about to show Director Harrison Blackwell exactly how wrong he was about her. She might not have grown up with private lessons and fancy instruments, but she had something that no amount of money could buy, a heart full of music and the courage to share it with the world. Maya walked into that audition room knowing that whatever happened in the next few minutes would change her life forever. She had been dismissed, insulted, and underestimated. Now it was time to prove that talent and passion could not be measured by the clothes someone wore or the neighborhood they came from. The real audition was about to begin. Maya followed Director Blackwell through a pair of heavy wooden doors into the most beautiful room she had ever seen. The audition hall was like something from a fairy tale, with high ceilings decorated in gold leaf and tall windows that let in streams of afternoon sunlight. The walls were covered in rich red fabric, and oil paintings of famous composers looked down from ornate frames. But none of that mattered to Maya once she saw the piano. In the center of the room sat a magnificent black Steinway grand piano. Its surface was so perfectly polished that it reflected the ceiling like a dark mirror. The lid was open, revealing the complex arrangement of strings and hammers inside. Maya had seen pictures of grand pianos online, but she had never stood next to one before. It was much larger than she had imagined, and it seemed to fill the room with its presence even when no one was playing it. Behind the piano, 3 judges sat at a long table covered with white cloth. Director Blackwell took his place in the center, with his assistant on one side and another woman Maya did not recognize on the other. They all had clipboards and pens ready, looking very official and serious. Please state your name and the piece you'll be performing, Director Blackwell said without looking up from his papers. Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Maya Rodriguez. I'll be playing Chopin's Minute Waltz. The woman Maya did not know looked up and smiled slightly. That's a lovely piece. One of my favorites. Director Blackwell made a note and glanced at his watch. Whenever you're ready, Miss Rodriguez. Maya approached the piano bench on legs that felt like they were made of rubber. She had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was overwhelming. The bench was exactly the right height, and when she sat down, the keys were perfectly positioned under her fingers. She had never sat at an instrument that felt so perfectly designed for playing. Maya opened her plastic folder and placed her sheet music on the music stand, though she had memorized every note months ago. Her hands were shaking as she adjusted the bench and positioned her feet on the pedals. She had practiced using pedals on the school piano, but these felt different, more sensitive and responsive. Taking a deep breath, Maya placed her hands on the keys and immediately pulled them back. The keys felt different from what she was used to. They were perfectly weighted, responding to the slightest touch, and when she pressed one gently, the sound that came out was pure and beautiful, in a way that made her want to cry. "Is there a problem?" Director Blackwell asked impatiently. "No, sir. I've never played a piano like this before." Director Blackwell exchanged another look with his assistant. "I see. Well, this is a standard concert grand piano. All serious pianists must learn to adjust to different instruments." Maya nodded and placed her hands on the keys again. She pressed down gently on a few notes, marveling at how clear and rich they sounded compared to her broken keyboard at home. Every note sang out perfectly with no buzzing or missing sounds. For the first time in her life, Maya could hear exactly how Chopin had intended his music to sound. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to calm her racing heart. In her mind, she went back to her small room above the store, practicing on her broken keyboard while her parents worked downstairs. She remembered the first time she had heard this piece drifting through the walls of the conservatory, and how it had made her feel like her heart was flying. Maya opened her eyes and began to play. The first few notes of the minute waltz came out tentatively. Maya was still getting used to the touch of the keys and the way the sound filled the large room, but as she continued into the opening section, something magical began to happen. The piano seemed to respond to her emotions, bringing out nuances in the music that she had never been able to hear before. On her keyboard at home, Maya had always had to imagine how certain parts should sound because the broken keys made it impossible to play them correctly. But now every note was perfect, every chord was complete, and the melody soared through the room with crystalline clarity. As Maya played, she began to forget where she was and who was listening. The music took over, and she was no longer the nervous girl in the faded dress carrying a plastic bag. She was just a musician, sharing a piece of beauty that had lived in her heart for months. The Minute Waltz is a challenging piece, full of rapid runs and complex rhythms that require both technical skill and musical sensitivity. Maya had practiced these difficult passages thousands of times on her broken keyboard, adapting to missing keys and working around the instrument's limitations. Now, with all 88 keys responding perfectly to her touch, the piece came alive in ways she had only dreamed of. Maya's fingers flew over the keys in the fast sections, each note clear and precise. In the gentler middle section, she let the melody sing out with a sweetness that seemed to fill every corner of the room. She had never felt so connected to an instrument before, as if the piano was an extension of her own voice. But it was not just the technical perfection that made Maya's performance special. Every note carried the weight of her story. The years of practicing in secret, the nights spent dreaming of moments like this, the sacrifices her family had made, and the determination that had brought her here despite everyone who had said she did not belong. When Maya reached the dramatic climax of the piece, where the melody soars above a cascade of running notes, she played with a passion that surprised even her. This was not just a performance. It was a declaration. She was announcing to the world that she was a musician, regardless of where she came from or what people expected of her. The judges at their table had stopped writing. Director Blackwell's pen was frozen in midair and his mouth was slightly open. The other woman was leaning forward in her chair, her eyes wide with amazement. Even the assistant had looked up from her clipboard and was watching Maya's hands move across the keys. Maya was completely absorbed in the music now. She had forgotten about the audition, the judges, and Director Blackwell's cruel words. She was in conversation with Chopin himself, bringing his creation to life with her own interpretation and emotion. Every phrase had meaning, every note had purpose, and the entire piece flowed like a story being told. As Maya approached the final section of the waltz, she felt tears starting to form in her eyes. This was the most beautiful she had ever sounded, the most complete she had ever felt as a musician. Whatever happened after this moment, she would always have these few minutes when she and the music were perfectly united. The last notes of the minute waltz rang out in the audition hall, fading slowly into silence. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment, unwilling to break the connection she felt with the instrument. Then she slowly lifted her fingers and folded her hands in her lap. The silence that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. It was not the uncomfortable quiet of people who did not know what to say, but the profound hush that follows something extraordinary. Maya could hear her own heartbeat and the distant sounds of traffic outside the conservatory. She turned to look at the judges, suddenly remembering where she was and why she was there. Director Blackwell was staring at her with an expression she could not read. His face had gone completely blank, as if he was seeing her for the first time. The other woman had tears in her eyes, and the assistant was frantically writing notes on her clipboard. Maya stood up from the piano bench, her legs still shaky from the adrenaline of performance. She had done it. She had played her piece from beginning to end without any major mistakes, and more importantly, she had played it with her whole heart. Whatever the judges decided, Maya knew she had given everything she had to offer. "Thank you," she said quietly, not sure if she should stay or leave. Director Blackwell seemed to shake himself out of a trance. That was quite... He stopped, apparently unable to find the right words. The woman Maya did not recognize spoke up. "That was a beautiful interpretation, dear. You play with remarkable feeling." Maya felt a flush of pride at the compliment, but she tried not to let her hopes get too high. She knew the competition was fierce, and one good performance did not guarantee anything. Director Blackwell finally found his voice, though it sounded different than it had before. Softer, less certain. "Miss Rodriguez, where did you say you studied?" "I taught myself, sir. Mostly from videos online and practicing whenever I could." The silence returned, even more profound than before. Maya could see the judges processing this information, trying to understand how someone with no formal training could have just delivered such a polished performance. "You taught yourself," Director Blackwell repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "Yes, sir." Maya gathered her sheet music and put it back in her plastic folder. She was not sure what else to say or do. The audition seemed to be over, but no one had dismissed her yet. Finally, Director Blackwell cleared his throat. "Thank you, Miss Rodriguez. We'll be in touch with our decision within the week." Maya nodded and headed toward the door, her plastic bag clutched in her trembling hands. As she reached for the door handle, she heard one of the judges whisper something to the others, but she could not make out the words. Walking out of that audition room, Maya felt like she was floating. She had done something she had never thought possible. As Maya's fingers touched the keys of the magnificent Steinway, something extraordinary began to happen. The music that emerged was not just technically correct. It was alive with emotion and meaning in a way that transformed the entire atmosphere of the room. Maya had started tentatively, but as she settled into the piece, her confidence grew with each measure. The broken keyboard at home had forced her to develop an incredibly sensitive touch, because she had to coax music from keys that barely worked. Now, with a perfect instrument responding to her every nuance, that same sensitivity created sounds of breathtaking beauty. The minute waltz flowed from Maya's fingers like water finding its natural course. But this was not a simple reproduction of notes on a page. This was Maya's story being told through Chopin's music. Every phrase carried the weight of her experiences. Every melody line spoke of dreams deferred but never abandoned. In the opening section, Maya's playing had a crystalline quality that made each note sparkle in the air. She had learned to make her broken keyboard sing by using tiny variations in touch and timing, and now those same techniques brought out colors and textures in the music that even surprised her. The judges found themselves leaning forward, drawn into the performance despite themselves. Director Blackwell, who had been prepared to endure what he assumed would be an embarrassing amateur performance, felt his preconceptions crumbling with every measure. This young woman was not just playing the notes correctly. She was interpreting them with a maturity and depth that many professional pianists never achieve. The music seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, as if it had been waiting years to finally be released. As Maya moved into the more technically challenging middle section of the piece, her years of creative problem-solving became evident. On her broken keyboard, she had been forced to rearrange certain passages to work around missing keys. In doing so, she had developed an understanding of the music's harmonic structure that went beyond simple memorization. Now, playing the piece as Chopin had written it, she brought insights to the performance that could only come from having truly wrestled with the music. The room itself seemed to respond to Maya's playing. The acoustics, designed to showcase the finest musical performances, carried every subtle dynamic and delicate phrasing to the farthest corners. Maya had never experienced such clarity and resonance, and it inspired her to reach even deeper into the emotional core of the piece. Maya's technique was not polished in the way that years of expensive lessons might have produced, but it was honest and effective. Her fingering choices were sometimes unconventional, born from necessity rather than tradition, but they created a unique voice that was entirely her own. She played with the directness of someone who had never been taught that music was supposed to be difficult or intimidating. The assistant at the judges' table had stopped taking notes entirely. She was a former professional pianist herself, and she recognized something special happening. This was not just a good audition. This was the kind of performance that reminded everyone why they had fallen in love with music in the first place. Director Blackwell found himself remembering his own first encounter with the Minute Waltz as a child. His wealthy parents had taken him to a concert where a famous pianist performed it, and the music had touched something in his young heart that made him want to become a musician. Over the years, through countless lessons and performances, he had somehow lost that sense of wonder. Maya's playing brought it flooding back. As Maya reached the dramatic climax of the piece where cascading notes support a soaring melody, something magical occurred. She was no longer thinking about technique or trying to impress the judges. She was simply sharing a piece of music that she loved with people who might understand its beauty. The performance became a conversation between Maya and Chopin across time, with the judges as privileged witnesses. The third judge, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was a professor at the State University who had heard hundreds of student auditions over her career. She prided herself on being able to assess talent objectively, regardless of a student's background, but Maya's performance was moving her in ways that went beyond professional evaluation. The music seemed to tell a story of struggle and triumph that resonated with her own memories of growing up as the daughter of immigrants. Maya's interpretation of the waltz was both respectful of Chopin's original intent and uniquely personal. She had studied recordings of famous pianists playing the piece, but without the burden of formal training telling her there was only one correct way to play it. This freedom allowed her to find her own voice within the music, creating a performance that was both authentic and fresh. The fast, spiraling passages that give the Minute Waltz its nickname flowed from Maya's fingers with apparent effortlessness, but there was nothing superficial about her approach. Each run and flourish was shaped with musical purpose, contributing to the overall narrative arc of the piece. Maya had learned to hear music as storytelling, and every technical element served that larger goal. In the gentler, more lyrical sections, Maya's playing revealed another dimension of her musicality. She could make the piano sing with a sweetness that seemed to come from some inner well of emotion. These moments provided contrast to the virtuosic passages, creating a performance with genuine depth and variety. Director Blackwell realized that his hands were trembling slightly as he gripped his pen. He had built his career on his ability to recognize talent, but he had nearly dismissed this extraordinary young musician based on her appearance and background. The magnitude of his error was becoming clear with every note Maya played. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Maya seemed to grow even more confident and expressive. The final section of the Minute Waltz requires the pianist to bring together all the technical and musical elements that have been developed throughout the piece. Maya did this with a maturity that suggested she understood not just how to play the notes, but why Chopin had written them. The room had become completely still, except for the sound of the piano. Even the traffic noise from outside seemed to have faded away, as if the entire world was holding its breath to listen to Maya's performance. The judges were transfixed, each lost in their own response to what they were witnessing. Maya's playing in these final moments was not just technically accomplished, it was transcendent. She had taken a piece that many pianists approach as a showpiece for demonstrating speed and agility, and revealed its deeper emotional content. The Minute Waltz became, under her interpretation, a meditation on aspiration and achievement, on the joy of movement and the satisfaction of arriving home. When Maya played the final, decisive chords of the piece, the sound seemed to hang in the air longer than physics should have allowed. She kept her hands on the keys for a moment, as if reluctant to break the connection she felt with the music and the instrument. Then slowly she lifted her fingers and placed her hands in her lap. The silence that followed was profound. It was not the awkward quiet that often follows student performances, but the reverent hush that audiences reserve for moments of genuine artistry. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For those few seconds, everyone in the room was united in the recognition that they had just experienced something extraordinary. Director Blackwell stared at Maya with an expression of complete bewilderment, as if she had just performed magic rather than music. His worldview, built on assumptions about class and cultural background, had been shattered by a 17-year-old girl with a plastic bag and a borrowed dress. Dr. Martinez had tears streaming down her cheeks, though she seemed unaware of them. As an educator, she had always believed that true talent would find a way to express itself regardless of circumstances. But Maya's performance was proof of that belief in its most pure and powerful form. The assistant, still clutching her pen, realized that she had no idea how to score what she had just heard. Her evaluation forms had categories for technique, interpretation, and musicality, but they seemed inadequate to capture the essence of Maya's performance. How do you measure the impact of music that changes everyone who hears it? Maya turned to look at the judges, suddenly remembering where she was and why she was there. The expressions on their faces told her that something significant had happened, but she was not sure what it meant for her future. All she knew was that she had played the best she had ever played, and for those few minutes, she had felt like the musician she had always dreamed of becoming. The silence stretched on, becoming almost uncomfortable in its intensity. Maya wondered if she should say something or simply leave, but she seemed frozen in place by the weight of what had just occurred. Finally, one of the judges began to move. Dr. Martinez slowly raised her hands and started to clap. The sound of her applause seemed to break a spell, and within moments all three judges were applauding with an enthusiasm that filled the room. Even Director Blackwell, despite his earlier dismissal of Maya, found himself clapping with genuine admiration. Maya stood up from the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She had hoped to play well, but she had never imagined creating this kind of reaction. As the applause continued, she felt a mixture of joy, relief, and uncertainty about what would happen next. The applause that had filled the audition room slowly faded, leaving behind a silence that felt different from the quiet that had preceded Maya's performance. This was not the respectful pause of people waiting for something to begin, but the profound stillness that follows something extraordinary. Maya remained standing beside the piano bench, her hands clasped in front of her, unsure of what she should do next. She had never experienced a moment like this before. The combination of pride, exhaustion, and nervous anticipation that comes after giving everything you have to a performance. Director Blackwell sat motionless at the judges' table, staring at Maya as if he was seeing her for the first time. His pen lay forgotten on his clipboard, and his mouth remained slightly open in an expression of complete bewilderment. For a man who prided himself on his ability to assess talent quickly and accurately, Maya's performance had shaken his confidence in his own judgment. Dr. Martinez was still wiping tears from her eyes with a tissue her assistant had quietly handed her. As a professor who had dedicated her career to nurturing young musicians, she recognized the rare combination of natural talent and emotional depth that Maya had just displayed. She had heard thousands of student performances over the years, but few had moved her so profoundly. The assistant, Ms. Chen, was frantically writing notes on her clipboard, trying to capture in words what she had just witnessed. As a former professional pianist herself, she understood the technical challenges of the piece Maya had just performed, but more importantly, she recognized the artistic maturity that had elevated the performance from merely correct to truly inspired. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The silence stretched on until it became almost uncomfortable, like the moment after a powerful speech when the audience needs time to process what they have heard. Maya shifted slightly from one foot to the other, wondering if she should break the quiet or wait for someone else to speak first. Finally, Director Blackwell cleared his throat and looked down at his papers, as if trying to remember what he was supposed to do next. When he looked up at Maya again, his expression had changed completely from the dismissive arrogance he had shown earlier. "Miss Rodriguez," he began, then stopped, seeming to search for the right words. That was quite unexpected. Maya was not sure how to interpret this comment. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, hoping it had been intended as a compliment. Dr. Martinez leaned forward in her chair, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Maya, that was absolutely beautiful. Your interpretation of the waltz was so personal and expressive. Where did you study that piece?" "I learned it from watching videos online, ma'am, and I practiced it on my keyboard at home." The judges exchanged glances that Maya could not read. Ms. Chen looked up from her notes with a puzzled expression. "You said you have a keyboard at home. What kind of instrument is it?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks as she prepared to admit the truth about her practice conditions. "It's an old electronic keyboard I bought at a garage sale. Some of the keys don't work and the sound isn't very good, but it was all I could afford." The silence that followed this revelation was different from the previous quiet moments. This was the stunned pause of people trying to understand how someone could develop such advanced skills under such challenging circumstances. "Director?" Blackwell slowly set down his pen and looked directly at Maya. "Are you telling me that you prepared this audition piece on a broken keyboard?" "Yes, sir. I had to change some parts of the piece to work around the keys that didn't make sound, and I used the piano at my high school sometimes when the music room was available." Dr. Martinez shook her head in amazement. "Maya, the technical control you just demonstrated requires thousands of hours of practice. How long have you been studying piano?" Maya thought for a moment, counting back to when she had first gotten her keyboard. "About 3 years, ma'am. But I've been listening to classical music for longer than that." Ms. Chen looked up from her clipboard with wide eyes. 3 years? You've only been playing for 3 years? Maya nodded, beginning to wonder if she had said something wrong. The judges seemed shocked by her answers, but she could not tell if that was good or bad for her chances. Director Blackwell stood up from his chair and walked around the table toward Maya. His movement was slow and deliberate, as if he was still processing what he had heard. When he reached the piano, he placed one hand on its polished surface and looked at Maya with an expression she had never seen before. "Miss Rodriguez, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice softer than Maya had heard it all day. "When you walked into this room today, I made assumptions about you based on your appearance and background. Those assumptions were not only wrong, they were inexcusable." Maya felt her heart begin to beat faster. She had not expected Director Blackwell to apologize for anything, and she was not sure how to respond. "I've been directing auditions for the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra for over 20 years, he continued. "I have heard some of the most talented young musicians in this city, students who have studied with the finest teachers and had access to the best instruments money can buy. But what you just did in there," he paused, shaking his head, "what you just did was remarkable." Dr. Martinez stood up from her chair and joined Director Blackwell near the piano. "Maya, your performance was not just technically proficient. It was emotionally mature and artistically compelling. You brought something to that music that cannot be taught, a genuine connection to its emotional content." Maya felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of hurt and embarrassment she had fought back earlier. These were tears of relief and joy, the emotional release that comes when someone finally recognizes and validates something you have worked so hard to achieve. "Thank you," Maya managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "Music means everything to me. I know I don't have the same training as other students, but I love it more than anything else in the world." Ms. Chen approached the group, still holding her clipboard but no longer writing. "Maya, can you tell us about your musical goals? What do you hope to do with your piano playing?" Maya thought about the question seriously before answering. "I want to be a concert pianist someday. I know it's a difficult career, and I know I have a lot to learn. But when I play music, I feel like I'm sharing something important with people. I want to spend my life doing that." Director Blackwell exchanged a meaningful look with the other judges. "Maya, the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra Scholarship is not just about money for lessons and instruments. It's about identifying young musicians who have the potential to become professional artists. The winners of our scholarship often go on to attend the most prestigious music schools in the country." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She understood that Director Blackwell was explaining the significance of the opportunity, but she was not sure if he was preparing her for good news or bad news. Based on what we heard today, Dr. Martinez said, I think it's safe to say that you have that potential. Maya, your performance was extraordinary, especially considering your lack of formal training. Maya felt her knees go weak with hope and disbelief. Does that mean? Director Blackwell held up a hand. We still have other candidates to hear, and we always take time to deliberate before making our final decision. But I want you to know that your audition today will not be easily forgotten. Ms. Chen smiled warmly at Maya. Regardless of what happens with the scholarship, Maya, you should be very proud of what you accomplished today. You proved that talent and dedication can overcome almost any obstacle. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. Thank you all so much. Just being here today, getting to play on that beautiful piano, has been more than I ever expected. Maya, Director Blackwell said, his voice now carrying none of the condescension that had marked their earlier conversation. Where do you see yourself studying music if you were to receive this scholarship? Maya had researched this question extensively during her preparation for the audition. I would love to study at the conservatory here in the city, sir. I know they have an excellent piano program, and being close to home would mean I could still help my family with the store. Dr. Martinez smiled. That's a very mature way to think about your future. Maya, it shows that you understand the importance of balancing your artistic goals with your personal responsibilities. Director Blackwell looked at his watch and then at the other judges. Maya, we need to continue with our remaining auditions. But before you go, I want to say something else. Maya waited, her heart still pounding with the intensity of everything that had happened. When I was your age, I was fortunate enough to have every advantage: private teachers, expensive instruments, supportive parents who could afford to nurture my musical ambitions. I sometimes took those advantages for granted. Seeing what you have accomplished with so few resources has reminded me of something important about music and about life. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Talent is not determined by wealth or social status. Artistry comes from the heart, not from the circumstances of one's birth. You have taught me that today, and I am grateful for the lesson. Maya spent the next 3 days in a strange state between hope and anxiety. She tried to go about her normal routine, helping in the store, doing homework, practicing on her broken keyboard, but her mind kept returning to those magical moments in the audition room. Sometimes she wondered if she had imagined the whole thing, if it was possible that she had really played that well, or that the judges had really responded so positively. Her parents could sense that something significant had happened, but Maya had only told them that the audition had gone better than expected. She was afraid to share too much detail, worried that talking about it might somehow jinx her chances or make the disappointment worse if the news turned out to be bad. On Thursday morning, Maya was restocking shelves in the store when the phone rang. Her father answered it, speaking in his usual cheerful voice that he used with customers and suppliers. But after a few seconds, his expression changed and he looked over at Maya with surprise. Maya, there's someone on the phone for you, from the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra. Maya's hands started shaking so badly that she almost dropped the can of beans she was holding. She had been expecting to hear from them, but she had imagined receiving a letter in the mail, not a phone call. Phone calls seemed more immediate, more personal, and she could not decide if that was a good sign or a bad one. Maya walked over to where her father was holding the phone, her legs feeling unsteady. She took a deep breath and tried to steady her voice. Hello, Maya Rodriguez. The voice was warm and professional, with an accent that suggested education and refinement. Yes, this is Maya. Maya, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra audition panel. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Maya's heart was beating so hard she was sure Dr. Martinez could hear it through the phone. Yes, ma'am. Maya, I'm calling with some very exciting news. The judging panel has made its decision regarding this year's scholarship recipient, and we would like to offer the full scholarship to you. For a moment, Maya was not sure she had heard correctly. The words seemed to hang in the air like something from a dream. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Dr. Martinez laughed gently. Maya, you won the scholarship. Congratulations. Your audition was absolutely extraordinary, and we are thrilled to have you join the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra family. Maya's knees gave out, and she had to lean against the counter to keep from falling. Tears started streaming down her face before she could stop them. Her father, who had been pretending not to listen while organizing nearby shelves, dropped what he was doing and rushed over when he saw her reaction. I can't believe it," Maya managed to say through her tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure, Maya. In fact, the decision was unanimous. All 3 judges agreed that your performance demonstrated exactly the kind of talent and potential we look for in our scholarship recipients." Maya covered the phone with her hand and turned to her father. "Papa, I won. I won the scholarship." Diego's eyes went wide and then he started crying too. He pulled Maya into a huge hug and she could feel his whole body shaking with emotion. Neither of them could speak for several seconds. Dr. Martinez continued on the phone, explaining the details of the scholarship program. Maya would receive free private piano lessons with one of the city's most respected teachers, free access to practice rooms at the conservatory, and the opportunity to perform with the youth orchestra in several concerts throughout the year. There would also be master classes with visiting artists and the chance to compete for additional scholarships to music schools. "Maya, there's something else I want to tell you," Dr. Martinez said. "Director Blackwell specifically asked me to convey a message to you. He said that your audition reminded him why he fell in love with music in the first place, and he wanted to personally apologize again for how he treated you when you first arrived." Maya wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself enough to respond professionally. "Please tell Director Blackwell that I understand, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. There's actually one more thing. Maya, the youth orchestra is planning a special concert next month featuring our scholarship recipients, and we would like you to be the featured soloist. You would perform your Chopin piece with full orchestra accompaniment in our main concert hall." Maya almost dropped the phone. A solo performance with orchestra was beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. "Dr. Martinez, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Maya. You've earned this opportunity and we believe you're ready for it." After Maya hung up the phone, her father immediately called her mother at the factory. Within minutes, Carmen had gotten permission to leave work early, and she arrived at the store breathless and excited. When Maya told her the news, Carmen burst into tears and pulled her daughter into the tightest hug of her life. "Mija, I'm so proud of you," Carmen said, her voice muffled against Maya's shoulder. "You never gave up on your dream, even when it seemed impossible." That evening, Abuela Rosa came over for dinner, and the whole family celebrated together. Maya's grandmother, who had always believed in the power of music to change lives, nodded knowingly as if she had expected this outcome all along. "Music finds a way," Abuela Rosa said, patting Maya's hand. "It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you have fancy teachers or teach yourself. If the music is in your heart, it will find its way out." Over the next few weeks, Maya's life changed dramatically. Her new piano teacher, Professor Elena Kowalski, was amazed by Maya's natural musicality but immediately began working to refine her technique. Maya discovered that while her self-taught methods had gotten her far, there were more efficient ways to play that would help her tackle even more challenging pieces. Professor Kowalski was patient and encouraging, helping Maya fill in the gaps in her musical education without making her feel inadequate about what she had not known. "You have something that cannot be taught," the professor told her during their second lesson. "My job is simply to give you the tools to express that gift more fully." Maya began practicing at the conservatory every day after school, using beautiful grand pianos in soundproof rooms. The contrast with her broken keyboard at home was still startling, and Maya found herself improving rapidly now that she could hear every nuance of her playing. The other members of the youth orchestra welcomed Maya warmly, though many were curious about her background. When they learned that she had been self-taught, their respect for her abilities grew even greater. Maya made friends easily, finding that her love of music created instant connections with young people from very different backgrounds. As the date of the special concert approached, Maya worked intensively on her performance of the Minute Waltz with orchestra. The arrangement was more complex than the solo version, requiring her to listen carefully to the other musicians while maintaining her own artistic interpretation of the piece. Director Blackwell, who had been transformed by his encounter with Maya, made a point of checking on her progress regularly. He never mentioned their awkward first meeting, but his encouragement and support were constant reminders of how much had changed between them. "Maya," he said during one of their conversations, "you've taught me something important about recognizing talent. I've been in this business for decades, but I almost missed one of the most gifted young musicians I've ever encountered because I let prejudice cloud my judgment. The night of the concert, Maya's entire family filled a row in the elegant concert hall. Diego had closed the store early, and Carmen had taken her first vacation day in 2 years. Abuela Rosa wore her best dress and proudly told everyone around her that the soloist was her granddaughter. Maya, wearing a beautiful blue dress that the orchestra had provided, stood in the wings listening to the audience settle into their seats. She was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness than she had felt at the audition. This was the excited anticipation of someone who belonged exactly where they were. When Maya walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, she saw hundreds of faces looking up at her with expectation and enthusiasm. The stage lights were bright, but she could still make out her family in the audience, her parents beaming with pride. Maya sat down at the concert grand piano, even more magnificent than the one she had played for her audition, and waited for Director Blackwell to raise his baton. The orchestra members were ready, their instruments gleaming under the stage lights. As the opening orchestral introduction began, Maya felt a sense of completion that she had never experienced before. All the years of dreaming, all the hours of practicing on her broken keyboard, all the moments of doubt and determination had led to this moment. When Maya's entrance came, she played with confidence and joy that filled every corner of the concert hall. The minute waltz soared over the orchestral accompaniment, her interpretation even more refined and expressive than it had been at the audition. The audience was completely captivated, hanging on every note. As Maya played, she thought about the girl she had been just a few months ago. Unsure, untrained, carrying her music in a plastic bag and wearing a faded dress. That girl had been brave enough to dream, and that bravery had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone who had encountered her music.